Sometimes there's a pleat in the center back, sometimes there are pleats on the sides, and sometimes there are gathers on two sides, sometimes there are gathers in the center. Do you guys need help with the gathers? Then
How do you convert a gather to a pleat?
you will, good question. So this is what I would do. Take the back, take my yoke, and match this up. If you want a center back pleat, then you know how much access you have in the fabric right here,
Okay.
and then you know how much you. I usually would notch it right here, and then that way I know I have 2 inches to turn it into a pleat. Anybody else? That's a good question. Alrighty. So when you are doing the yoke, we usually use 2 pieces because it makes your garment look better. The shirt is going to look better. It hangs better from your shoulder down. So you will sandwich. If this is your back, your gathers and pleats or whatever you have is done as first, and there's basting done in there, and then you want to align the corner to the corner of your yoke and center back to the center back, right? And then you will do the same thing right here. So basically your back piece should be sandwiched in between 2 yoke pieces.
I was curious why my pattern that called for yoke didn't have 2 pieces, because that usually when you put on a shirt, like a cowboy shirt type, it's always finished inside. It wouldn't be a raw edge.
Right.
This would have been a raw edge. Like, didn't make sense. Or I would
Exactly.
have had to finish it somehow.
Once again, manufacturers do that to save on fabric. I mean, if once again you're making thousands of shirts and you're saving 1 piece of yoke, you're saving yards and yards of fabric. So, but that's not always how it turns out best.
Okay, you got me.
So I usually go with 3 pins, 2 on the sides and the center, but if you need an extra pin, feel free to do so. And then once again, I have 1/2 inch seam allowance. You might have 5/8. Just follow your pattern instructions on that. Do we backstitch here?
Yep.
Because we intend to keep the seam, so we are going to backstitch here. Alright, so what's the next step now? Press them, the yoke pieces up.
And then you treat it the same. Drip dry coffee with it. You
All right.
wash it and hang it up. Okay, go ahead.
So to answer your question, you asked me on Monday if you should do the stay stitching at the neckline first or if you should sew the yoke first. I like to sew the yoke in first because if I do the stay stitching, I have to do it in 3 separate steps. I have to stay stitch this piece first and then this piece and then the fronts, right? But if I do the yoke first, since these are the straight seams, I can just do the stay stitching as one part around the neckline. Once again, it's all about being able to save time and labor and money. Who knows, you might be able to sell your shirt more because it costs $2 cheaper than your competitor. All right, now this is a tricky part. I have seen too many times people attaching the wrong pieces. So if you just go like this, you might end up flipping it. I have seen many people do this. I've seen many people do this and all that. So The trick is to have your back lay wrong side up. Okay? And if you have the darts sewn, that's a lot more obvious if you have darts in the back. But I didn't get a chance to do the darts in the back yet. And then lay your front, just like how the shirt will be worn. So the wrong sides together, front and back, and hold it just like this. All right?
What are we doing now?
We're sewing the front to the yoke right here.
Okay.
Right, so what we're gonna do here is
And my brain's getting like, what? Wrong sides together? This doesn't make sense to me yet, so I'll keep watching.
all right. So the tricky part is that you are going to just hold these two pieces together. All right, and then for this piece, you're gonna flip it. All right. So when you have your shirt sitting like this, basically to be able to sandwich it in, you need to sew it like this, correct? To have a finished look right here. So to do that, you will hold two of these, one front and yoke, wrong sides together, and then this piece. Right hand, wrong hand. And your match up your thumbnails.
Is that after you sew it?
No, that's
You're
before
kind
you
of
sew it.
making a little M. Like there's two little arches. Like the McDonald's arches.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
And then you're doing this,
Okay.
right?
Gonna sew it.
Yeah, that's what I'm waiting.
Well, sewing is easy. Once you got this, then it's easy. So I'm gonna,
But now if you stitch those pieces together, you just do it at the neck, then. That'll work.
what is it? Yeah. If you stitch the neck after you have the yoke done, then you could do it all, like both the front and the back together as one. All right, so I'm starting at that corner that I had in my hand at the given seam allowance. And now I have these three straight, really small straight edges to work with. Pin, pin. These are really small edges, so you might not even need to pin these, but if you need to pin these, do not hesitate, where a lot of people will, for some reason, have trouble. Backstage. All right, so now when you open this up,
That's awesome.
that's how your front gets sandwiched in between your yoke pieces without having a top stitching, because you don't always want to have top stitching in there. Right? Everybody got it? All right, for
When we get there.
for the stay stitching part, before we do the collar and stand, what you want to do is you want to start at the center back notch right here. I have a notch. Why do we do the stay stitching? What's the purpose of stay stitching?
Hold it together.
So before-
Garment holds it shaped after
Right.
repeated washings and stuff.
Exactly. Even when you're sewing, you will
It's
feel
easier to
like it
color
makes a
on too.
difference. So what is the allowance for stay stitching? How do you know how far you stay stitch from the edge?
You look forward.
Isn't it usually about an eighth of an inch within, or before, like, before the
Seam line?
stitch?
Before the stitch. So if I have half an inch seam allowance, I will stay stitch at 3/8 of an inch away from the edge. That way I don't have to take the stay stitching out after I'm done sewing. It can just stay in the seam allowance. And if you have too far out towards the edge, then it's not gonna be helpful because you can't really, it doesn't keep it from stretching when you do the collar.
Will we be trimming and clipping this neckline before we put the collar on? Or after the collar?
After we put the collar on, we might trim it down. And many times when you're trimming your seam allowances, if your stay stitching is too close to your raw edge, yeah. So you always want to do the stay stitching from center back. You see how, you know, it was just one seam and one stay stitching, it
Yeah.
kind of cuts down on the steps. And then once I have this side done, I will have the stay stitching on this side as well. Technically, you will do this seam, and then these two seams, and stay stitch, and then you're ready to do the collar. Yeah? Awesome. So what's our homework?
Pocket,
Have our darts done, have our front plackets done,
yoke,
have our yoke done, stay stitching at the neckline, and
the
a
pocket.
pocket sample if you're not gonna do the pocket on your shirt, because you have all the way until next week's Wednesday, since we don't have class on Monday. All right, so please note that down. If you don't have these things done, we are gonna move on to the collar and you will be behind.